Hi, I'm Sean Anderson, and welcome to the Ponca City Public Schools Board Wrap-Up Show. It's our monthly visit with Superintendent Dr. Pennington, and we always do this right after the monthly board meeting, and this is the November Board Wrap-Up Show. And Dr. Pennington, a lot of things were discussed at this meeting, and we're going to get right into it. There were a lot of discussion items. It was a lengthy meeting.
It was a very, I think we probably were here for 2.5 hours Monday night, and that's really a long time for us.
Yeah, reading was a big focus, and reading and how reading is taught in Ponca City Public Schools.
Right.
Tell us about that.
So what we did, and I would encourage anybody that is interested in the technical aspects of this to, we post a video of the board meeting on our Facebook page and on the district website, and so I would encourage people to go look at that because it was a very detailed discussion about reading. What we did is we kind of walked the board through how we do reading, and the basic framework for reading is a program that is known as Literacy First, and it is a framework for reading. It's not a textbook. It's not a program where, if you do step A, then you do step B, but it's just a framework for how reading is taught. And so if you have a child in school, you've heard, that we have word list, and that in kindergarten and first grade, we have word lists that we focus on. Well, the word list is a part of Literacy First. If you've walked into one of our elementary classrooms, you probably have seen a word wall. And those are words that students will be in the text that students are reading, and we have these words placed on the wall where they can see them. Not only maybe the word that's been introduced to them a month ago, or what words are coming up, but it's just a way to kind of show to kind of remind students of all the language that they're learning. We talked about the difference between phonemic awareness and phonics, and we talked about vocabulary. And we tried to put that into a structure so the board could understand what we do with reading. And then after that, we talked about, so what happens when a student is not reading at the level that is appropriate for their grade. And so then we talked about interventions, and we talked about, and maybe a parent may have been sitting in a meeting and you may have a friend that teaches and you've heard somebody talk about tier 1 or tier 2 or tier 3.
Right.
And so we explained what those things are. And so what is tier 1? Well, tier 1 is normal classroom instruction. When I went to school, when most of us went to school, we just had regular instruction. Well, that's tier 1. Mm-hmm. And then tier 2 is an intervention. And so a student, maybe they don't comprehend what they read as well as they should. They may be able to pick up a book and read every word, and you would listen to them and go, wow, what a great reader. But when you ask them questions about it, they don't understand it. So we have strategies that we use during tier 2 intervention to help students with their comprehension. And then for those students who tier 1 is not successful, tier 2 is not successful, then we have tier 3 interventions that we provide. And those are interventions, they sometimes may involve a special education class that may be appropriate for that student, maybe a placement in special ed. It may be that they just work with a special ed teacher who is trained in learning disabilities to help them progress enough that they can go back to tier 2, and then hopefully progress enough they can go back to tier 1. So it was a pretty intensive discussion. Most of us, we just think people just read, and if you're a good reader, then you don't give any thought to the struggles that students have. And we have a lot of students in this district, and really we have a lot of students statewide and nationwide that don't read on grade level, and it's a continuing problem.
And this is something that affects in every way their educational experience.
Right. And it's something that, there's not a magic bullet. No one has yet found that one thing that you can do that will help every young person become a a good, solid reader. And so, again, we struggle with it just like anybody else. But it doesn't mean we don't work at it very hard. When we have a student that gets to the high school and they don't read very well, it's not because we haven't tried a whole lot of stuff in kindergarten through 5th grade, 6th, 7th, and 8th. We've worked very hard with those students. They're just, for whatever reason, and again, for most of us, it's hard for us to contemplate that because reading seemed to come easy to us. So we don't see reading as a complicated thing, but for some students it's pretty complicated.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, at the November school board meeting, a lot of things were discussed, and sometimes that involves discussing numbers that are tough to take in. And every year, you get the dropout report, and that was a topic of discussion. Where do we stand as far as that dropout numbers?
Well, we had 9 students at the high school that we identified as dropouts last year, and then we had 9 students at the middle school level. Now, that obviously 9 is too many. It's hard for anybody to imagine today that anyone would drop out of school. But if you go back and look at that from a historical perspective, those numbers are significantly less than they've been over the past. So we continue to get better. There's lots of things that some of those dropouts are students who moved out of state and did not reconnect with us, so that we weren't able to report to the State Department where those students were now going to school. There are some states that will allow you to enroll and they don't require official records. You may have had students who decided to do an online education. If they're doing that outside of the state of Oklahoma, then they don't get accounted for in our system. We have a system in Oklahoma now that when a student enrolls in, whether it's an online school or whether it's another public school, they have a number, and the system in the state keeps track of those numbers. So if a student leaves us and shows up at Midwest City, they may not have told us that, but we'll get a note from Midwest City saying that we share this same student number. The same thing happens with our online schools that are based in Oklahoma. But if someone's in an online school that's based someplace else, then we don't have any way of tracking that. But there are some students who just drop out the way students traditionally used to drop out. They just decide that they're not going to come to school anymore, and it's frustrating when we have state laws in place that say that you have to be in school till you're 18 and those kinds of things.
And that's a good question. I think for some people watching this, the question might be, how do you drop out legally at the middle school level? How does that happen?
Well, it's not. It doesn't happen.
Okay.
But you get in that whole issue of first of all, if a parent withdraws and tells us that they're going to homeschool their child, or if they don't tell us that, then there's nothing we can do about it. And so while we may report a child for not being in attendance, the police, it's not something that law enforcement pursues. They don't go knock on your door if your child's not attending school. Now, if you get stopped in a traffic accident or a traffic stop and they run your plates and they run your name and they find out that that the district attorney has filed a complaint because your child's not attending school, then we may catch up with that parent at that time. But
so sometimes it comes down to just a communication breakdown between the parent.
Well, sometimes it comes down to just the fact that who's going to enforce it. The school district doesn't have any authority to go out and arrest or do anything to compel students to attend school. That falls under the responsibility of the district attorney, and the district attorney office doesn't have the manpower to go out and check up on students who are not attending school.
Right.
Again, they will send a letter home, but parents sometimes choose to ignore that letter.
Right.
So it still happens, and we don't, we prefer that it didn't.
Right.
But that's kind of the world we live in, and especially when you get to students who are 17, 18 years old,
Right.
and they've decided sometimes they will stop attending school and they'll leave the state.
Mm-hmm.
Now they're not enrolled in school anywhere, but they've left home, and that, especially with our secondary students, that happens a lot. They're leaving home, or they may not leave Ponca City, but they've moved out of the house.
Right.
And that happens quite a bit, and then it's that whole issue then of, you can go, the police can go to the family's house and say, why isn't your 17-year-old in school? And they're going to say, well, the 17-year-old doesn't live here anymore.
They don't live here. Yeah.
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 And so I think that what is common in most of those circumstances is that if there's a common thread, it is some type of family that's in crisis.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's obviously not the best thing for the child.
Right.
A lot of times those students will come back into our alternative program or to an alternative program that they have at the Career Tech, but there's something going on in that child's life at that time that with everything they're dealing with, school's not the priority.
Disrupts their process.
Right.
Obviously, you'd like the number to be 0 when you get
Sure.
a dropout report, but compared historically to the numbers, this doesn't sound like a lot. It's a lower number than I thought you'd say.
Right. When you're talking about 9, you think about the high school. We have 1,200 students at the high school,
Mm-hmm.
and we had 9 last year that dropped out. So again, nobody likes that to happen.
Right.
I think sometimes we assume that everybody in today, we all recognize that everybody needs at the minimum a high school education.
Right.
And so it's always shocking when you have students that drop out, or you have students that go to school for 12 years and they don't finish.
Yeah.
They're a couple of credit hours short and they don't come back.
Yeah.
Again, there's lots of things going on in the lives of young people that most of us just don't have any idea.
Yeah. Another item on the list at the board meeting here in November, the safety plan for not just one school in particular, but the entire school district. And there is a safety plan in place, and it's something, Dr. Pennington, that as a school district and across the nation, these safety plans are
Right.
critically important.
Right.
What is our safety plan in a nutshell? And
Okay.
that's kind of a broad question.
Well, what it really is, it's a note. It's actually a book. We have a book, and we every teacher has a copy of it. Every building administrator has a copy of it, and it walks through what we're going to do in specific situations. So it talks about what we do when there's a fire, and so it would have, this is we're going to bring the fire alarm, and then at the building level they'll talk about which doors people go out of. What does it mean? What does an intruder alert look like, and what are in our building? What are the code words for intruder alert? And then we talk about the drills that we have and how many of those drills we're going to do each year, and then how the administrators report to us that they've completed those drills. So and we talks about our crisis team if we have something happen where we feel like it's not uncommon in a school our size, or any school district for that matter, to have a tragedy strike, whether it's an automobile accident that claims the life of a teacher or a student. A student dies because of a terminal illness, and so we have a crisis plan in place, and it talks about how we activate that crisis team and who's responsible to be at that site to provide counseling for students. So it's all in that book, and so it's something that that I have a copy in my desk, and so something happens, and I may not immediately remember what I'm supposed to do when we have an intruder at one of our sites. I can pick up that plan and I can look and say, okay, we've got an intruder. We're going to do the building administrator's done A. Now it's our office's job to do B, C, and D.
Right.
And so that's what the plan consists of, and we review that every year. It's also our safe school committees are a part of that plan. So we have a safe school committee in place at every building site that includes 2 teachers, 2 students, 2 parents, building level administrator. They talk about safety several times a year and what can be done at that site to improve student safety. So I mean, we're very focused on school safety, just like everybody else is today.
Well, and with the remodeling projects that have been completed
Right.
at so many of the sites with Ponca City Public Schools, is it safe to say that our schools here in Ponca City are safer than they've ever been?
They are safer than they've ever been. But I think we also have to recognize that there's nothing that's 100% sure.
Right.
And so if we have somebody that has bad intentions, it's harder for them today to carry those intentions out than it's ever been.
Yeah.
And that's really all that we can really do. Just make it as difficult as we can. We learn. We study events that happen other places. If you go back to several years ago when we first put in our first secure entrance at East, where you had to walk in, you went through a lobby guard. We learned from Sandy Hook that it wasn't enough just to have glass in those entryways. It needed to be bullet-resistant glass.
Yeah.
And so the ones that are older secure entrances, we've come in and we've replaced glass with bullet-resistant glass. The new ones we've built, we've put bullet-resistant glass in. And so, you're buying time as much as anything else to give you a chance to hit the button and, to alert people and do the best you can to protect your kids.
Yeah.
And just hope it never happens here.
Right, exactly. And reviewing that safety plan every year, making revisions and learning, and it's just always evolving.
Right.
So, fantastic. Lewis and Associates were a part of this board meeting in November with Ponca City Public Schools, and that was exciting because they had some artist renderings of the new concert hall. And tell us, how did this go?
Well, it went very well. It's one thing to think about doing this and to make a proposal and get a bond issue passed. And I think one thing I always tell people, when we're out talking about a bond issue, and we're always, we'll show a picture of what we think something may look like. Mm-hmm. We don't know what it's going to look like because we haven't passed the bond issue yet, and we haven't paid the architect anything.
Right.
So now that we have bond dollars, and now that the architect's been able to really plan and look at, to get the inside of the building set, and now they've been able to design the outside of the building, and we have these pictures that are on our website, and folks can go look at them. But it really is, I think, a beautiful building. I think the public is going to be very pleased whenever it's constructed. The architects have done a great job of trying to blend that building into the architecture of the high school. And people sometimes forget really the great amount of effort that's gone in this district to make sure that our high school campus, from an architectural standpoint, has some uniformity. It's not perfect.
Right.
I mean, obviously, if you drive down 7th Street, you can tell that the Anderson building doesn't look like the rest of it.
Right.
But if you go down 5th Street and you look at the 5th Street side of the building, you can't really tell the difference between the original Howe building, which was built, I think, in 1926,
right,
the addition that was done in the 1950s, or the addition that was done in the late 1990s. So with and even the Anderson building to some extent kind of ties in. I mean, it looks like the architecture of its time, kind of flat, modern, lots of glass. Mm-hmm. But this building really does look like the high school. Is going to have the same outside coloring, so it's going to be that kind of, I call it a tan. I don't know what the correct coloring is, but it's going to have that tan exterior. It's going to just something as simple as, next time you drive around the high school, look, one thing you'll notice is all of our entrances to the high school have red roofs on top of them.
Yeah.
I'd never thought about that until the architect pointed it out. And in the concert hall, where the entryways are, there's red roofs. because
fantastic.
that's something that we do in this
Yeah.
district. And so that's really a cool feature. That's one of the advantages, I think, of the fact that we use a local architect.
Yeah.
They're very aware of the
Connected.
history of this district, and
Sure.
so they do everything they can to make sure. And the same thing will happen with the press box and the football weight room and locker room. All those things will tie into the high school campus. So those of us who are here today will know those are new construction, but 25 years from now, people who don't know the history of Ponca City, when they drive by the high school complex, they won't know
That it hasn't always been a
it
part.
had always been that way.
Right, right. Well, bids approved for the new press box at
Right.
Sullivan Stadium. That was a part of the meeting, and that's exciting. Some big changes coming.
We have a lot of big changes coming. Press box bids came in higher than we anticipated. That is not uncommon with construction projects. That's part of the challenge that you
Right,
face.
right.
It's that whole issue, and I have to remind people all the time, when we're out and we're making estimates of what we believe things will cost, you have to remember that we haven't paid anybody anything yet to design anything. And that's the problem with school bond issues, is the way we're structured in Oklahoma, that we don't have the funds available to pay an architect to design something, get a firm estimate of what it's going to cost, then go to the public and ask for the money to build it. We just don't have the funds to do that. So we do best guesses, and our architects are pretty good about estimating what costs are going to be, and we try to work closely with our construction managers before we go out and tell the public what we want to do. We have a general idea, but there are just some
So
things.
you really work from a ballpark figure,
Ballpark figure.
and then
And I
move
tell
forward.
you, what kills you is code. Is
yeah.
all the code things that until you actually get it to the engineers and they're actually doing those final design things, that they come up with all, you got code says this and code goes that, and sometimes you look at that and go, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard of.
Right.
That's just dumb.
Right.
But it's
So
code.
what are you going to do? You got to stay within the code.
You got to stay within the code.
Yeah. Well, bids approved for the press box Sullivan Stadium, and soon, in not long, it'll be time for the bidding process for the changes at Robson
Right.
Fieldhouse
We anticipate that'll happen in December.
and the locker room and the weight room facility.
Should happen in January.
All right.
And part of the concert hall, the concrete of the concert hall, we believe that will be done in January. Then the actual from the ground up part of the concert hall, we think that'll be bid either in February or March.
All right.
So it's pretty exciting.
Very nice. Dr. Pennington, thank you so much.
You bet. Thank you.
The board wrap-up show every month right here. We talk with Dr. Pennington about the school board meeting, and of course you can watch the school board meeting on the school's website. You can also watch it live as it happens every month, and of course this board wrap-up show kind of bringing it all in, talking about all of the different topics that were discussed and handled during that school board session. For the school board wrap-up, Ponca City Public Schools, I'm Sean Anderson. Thank you for watching.